Welcome to EPC News by HaleForm, Episode 2. BHP announces pumped hydro project study at Mount Arthur Coal.
Hi there.
This deep dive is brought to you by HaleForm Technology Solutions.
Good to be here.
Today, we're really zeroing in on this pretty big news, actually. BHP, the mining giant.
Yeah.
They're partnering up with ACCIONA Energía, and they're looking into, well, a pumped hydro energy storage project.
Right, at the Mount Arthur Coal site in the Hunter Valley, New South Wales.
Exactly. We've got a bunch of reports here. Michael West, Chem Analyst, Energy Global, Mining Technology, quite a few.
Australian Mining Review, and Spin too. So a good cross-section of views.
Our mission today is really to unpack this. What's the deal with this announcement? What are the, potential upsides, downsides?
And why is it such a significant development, especially thinking about the mine's future and the whole region's energy situation?
Can a coal mine really become a green energy hub? That's the big question, I suppose.
It is. Okay, so let's start with the context. The Mount Arthur mine itself. So BHP had already said, look, we're planning to close this mine by 2030.
Yeah, that wasn't exactly news, the closure itself, end of its economic life, basically.
Pretty much. A major thing for the Hunter Valley, obviously.
Absolutely. But then, like you said, there was a bit of a, maybe not a U-turn, but a modification.
Sort of. The NSW government stepped in, granted a 4-year extension. So mining can continue until June 2030 now.
Which is interesting because BHP isn't just saying, great, 4 more years of coal.
No, exactly. They're framing it quite differently. They're saying this gives them breathing room, time to plan a sustainable transition for the site after mining stops.
Which leads us straight into this pumped hydro idea.
Precisely.
Yeah.
BHP and ACCIONA Energy are now doing the groundwork, the investigation, to see if this massive site at 7,000 hectares could actually host a big pumped hydro facility.
And the potential impact sounds, well, significant. BHP's initial studies, they're talking about maybe 1,000 jobs, during construction anyway.
Yeah, during construction. That's a key point. We need to think about how that compares to the, long-term jobs the mine provided.
Good point. Are they the same skills? Does the community need retraining? Big questions there.
Definitely. And beyond construction, the reports also mention ongoing economic activity for Muswellbrook.
And the power output, wow. Chem Analyst, Energy Global, they're throwing around numbers like potentially powering 500,000 homes across NSW every day.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
It really shows the scale they're thinking about. They call it dispatchable power.
Right, dispatchable. So that means it's power you can turn on when you need it, unlike solar when it's cloudy or wind when it's still.
You got it. Pumped hydro gives you that reliable, on-demand electricity, which is, frankly, essential for keeping the grid stable as we add more renewables.
Okay.
Think of it like a giant water battery using gravity.
A water battery. I like that.
You pump water up to a higher reservoir when you've got cheap or excess power, maybe overnight, or when renewables are abundant.
Storing potential energy.
Exactly. Then, when demand is high or the sun isn't shining, you let that water flow back down through turbines.
Generating electricity. Simple concept, really.
The concept is simple, yes. The engineering and economics on this scale, less so. But it's a proven technology for grid stability.
Okay, so why is BHP themselves so interested? I mean, beyond just finding something to do with the land.
Well, they state pretty clearly, according to the reports, that the community wants to see the site repurposed positively after mining.
Makes sense. You can't just leave a giant hole, can you?
Not ideally, no. And they talk about legacy, wanting to leave a positive mark on the Hunter Valley, support jobs, bring in investment.
Geraldine Slattery, BHP's president Australia, she's quoted saying they looked at, well, lots of options, right? Including just selling the mine.
Yeah, divestment was on the table, but they landed on this closure plan, and now this repurposing study is the next logical step, it seems.
And bringing in ACCIONA Energía makes sense, too. They're not exactly new to this game.
Not at all. They've got a strong track record. Large-scale renewables, big infrastructure projects, both in Australia and globally. Chemlist and Energy Global point that out.
So they'll spend the next year or so doing their due diligence, checking if this whole thing is actually viable.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
A 12-month feasibility study. They bring the technical know-how.
Okay. And there's also that community fund BHP mentioned, $30 million.
Yes, a commitment to help the Upper Hunter region transition after 2030.
How is it supposed to work?
The idea is a shared decision-making model with the community, focusing on jobs, diversifying the economy, things like that.
Sounds positive, on the surface at least.
It does. But, and this is a fairly big but, there's also quite a bit of skepticism floating around.
Okay, here we go.
Michael West's article particularly brings up concerns from technical experts, not just about pumped hydro, but also this sort of broader coal to lakes idea.
Coal to lakes? Like flood the pits and make them recreational.
Kind of like what happened in some old mining areas in East Germany. But an ecologist, Peter Hughes, quoted in the article, pours some cold water on that idea for the Hunter Valley.
Why is that?
He points out the groundwater there is very different. Highly saline, apparently, and contains heavy metals. Not exactly ideal for swimming or boating, unlike the German examples.
Right. Saline and heavy metals don't sound great for a lake, so that lake's idea might be tricky.
Seems so.
Yeah.
And Hughes also raises a big technical flag, specifically about the pumped hydro plant itself.
Okay.
Well, apparently a CSIRO report suggested the site might have the right sort of height differences, the topography needed for pumped hydro. But the water quality in the mine voids is a major issue. It's corrosive.
Corrosive. So it would damage the equipment, the turbines, the pipes.
Potentially, yes. High salinity, heavy metals, that stuff can eat away at standard machinery pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You'd likely need specialized, more expensive materials.
Which bumps up the cost significantly, I'd imagine.
And affects the long-term operating costs, too. It's not just a one-off expense.
Okay, that sounds like a serious hurdle. Can they clean the water?
Hughes suggests they might need extensive, costly water purification, maybe even reverse osmosis, desalination.
Wow, desalination. That uses a lot of energy itself, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And that's his other concern, that the energy needed to purify the water could potentially cancel out a big chunk of the energy the pumped hydro plant actually generates.
So it could end up being much less efficient than hoped, affecting the whole net energy benefit.
That's the worry he raises, yes. It's a critical question for the feasibility study.
Absolutely. And what about regulations, approvals?
Oh, yeah, that's another massive area. Hughes highlights getting a project like this signed off is complex.
I bet. What sort of approvals are we talking?
You're looking at environmental laws, state planning acts, water access licenses, and potentially Aboriginal heritage approvals, too, especially if flooding areas impact significant sites. It's a minefield, pardon the pun.
Right. A regulatory minefield. And the article mentioned past skepticism, too, from experts.
Yes. Apparently, even before this latest announcement, some technical experts had doubts about whether pumped hydro was really viable at this specific location.
So it's not a completely new concern?
It's not. It adds another layer of complexity to assess.
Okay, so lots of potential, but also some really significant challenges on the table. Technical, environmental, regulatory.
It's a big undertaking. And it's interesting how the mine extension approval fits into this broader picture.
How so?
Well, according to that Michael West piece, citing a BHP source, the extension was seen as necessary, partly to allow this kind of transition planning, but also to help stabilize the electricity grid while the state government pushes forward with its renewable strategy, keeping the lights on during the transition, essentially.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it? Meeting current energy needs while building for the future.
A definite tightrope walk. And these transition projects are just huge and expensive.
Yeah, the article mentions Snowy Hydro 2.0 and its cost blowouts as a kind of warning sign.
It's a reminder that these mega projects often face unexpected hurdles and escalating costs.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening in?
Well, BHP's plan, or study at least, for pumped hydro at Mount Arthur is genuinely fascinating. It's this vision of turning a fossil fuel site into potentially a major renewable energy asset.
The upsides are clear jobs, potentially lots of clean energy storage for NSW. Very appealing.
But as we've heard, the expert concerns are serious too. The water quality issues, the cost, the regulatory hoops, they're not trivial.
Those technical, environmental, and regulatory mountains definitely need climbing, or at least assessing very carefully.
Absolutely. So the next 12 months, with ACCIONA Energía doing their deep dive, that's going to be critical. We'll see if this vision holds water, literally and figuratively.
It really throws up a big question for you to think about, doesn't it? How do we actually manage this massive energy transition?
Yeah, how do we balance the push for renewables with the very real, practical environmental challenges of repurposing these huge industrial landscapes like coal mines?
There are no easy answers there.
Definitely not.
This is just the start of this story, of course. We really encourage you to keep following it as ACCIONA does its work and more details emerge. Consider all the angles.
Yeah, it'll be one to watch.
This deep dive into the BHP Pumped Hydro Project study at Mount Arthur Coal was brought to you by HaleForm Technology Solutions.
Thanks for tuning in.
Please subscribe and like the HaleForm TV channel on YouTube for more in-depth analysis like this. We'll see you next time.